Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast. Spoiler alert, we don't discuss conventional, linear, boring career change here. This is the place where we talk about finding an aligned career path that feels like an extension of who you are, where you get paid for being yourself. Forget personality quizzes, soul-crushing scrolling on job sites, and breaking your brain trying to find your why. Join me and many other career changers who've changed their career holistically by first defining who they are at their core and then using this blueprint to design a fulfilling career or business. We use the mind-body-soul approach, and we take into consideration the complexity and multidimensionality of all that you are and want to represent in the world. This is where purpose-led careers are born and built. I'm your host, Vilma Oseita. Let's go. Hi, friends. Happy Monday. I hope you're all fabulous. Oh my goodness, I just remembered. I saw this reel the other day and it cracks me up. It was a little short video with an actress and comedian, Tiffany Haddish. I love her. She's so funny. And I think she was in some sort of like interview and the host asked her, "Hi, how are you?" And then she goes, "Successful. How are you?" And the host literally cracked up laughing. She couldn't continue the conversation. She just literally walked off stage laughing because Tiffany held so much power and confidence in that one word answer. And it was just one of those mic drop moments. I will never forget that. I feel like I need to borrow that. Next time someone asks me, "Hey, how are you?" I'll be like, "Successful. How are you?" And after she actually made it better, after she added, "I'm alive today. I woke up today. That's a win. That's my success." So yeah, I'm sharing this to remind you that I think I talk about this as well in the podcast. We talk about this a lot with my clients, is that we can define what success means to you. And in fact, that's one of the exercises I usually insist my clients do whenever they start working with me, because we need to examine what definition of success they came in with. Because if we skip on this step, that definition could completely cloud the whole career change process and them trying to find alignment. Because what happens a lot of the times, the markers of success that we bring into this new, more authentic chapter are often dictated by others. They are set by social norms that were created by outdated structures. They serve no one, and definitely they're not going to serve the version that you are becoming. So for Tiffany, I feel like apart from the obvious, recognition of her talent and her probably feeling successful, she said, "I woke up today. That is what I define as success." So this is just a sweet reminder to really inspect what standards you hold yourself against so you don't have to perpetually chase that dangling carrot. And I have a really good example of this. Real quick, let me share this. This is not necessarily the topic of the week, but I still want to talk about this. When I changed into coaching at the very beginning, what I did, I very quickly started joining groups of other entrepreneurs, mostly female entrepreneurs. I wanted to be in rooms where women were making an impact, making the money, growing and scaling their businesses. And I also hired a business coach. Because this world was very new to me and I wanted someone to at least initially show me the ropes. And within this one particular mastermind that I was a part of, it was all about scaling a business. And each month, it was a rule. We basically agreed to that. Each month, we had to publicly report our monthly revenue of our business. So basically, all of the women in the group, there are like 100 plus women, at a certain time of the month, we would go look at our records and then we would report how much money we make, how much money is cash in hand, how much is still incoming and like receivables and so on and so forth, right? And this was basically an exercise in accountability. It was also an example of what's possible because some women were earning, multiple six figures. Some of them were millionaires. Some of them were just starting out. I feel like it was both humbling and inspiring at the same time. And we can obviously argue whether it's right or wrong, but that's not the point. That's not what I'm sharing. The point is that without even realizing what happened, I really quickly got into this vicious cycle of setting a goal and wanting to increase my income every single month, at least by a little. And it became my chase, my need, my drug, my frustration. I basically got so zoned in on beating my own number. And that was the only goal that I had. I was like, okay, so if I made X amount of money, next month I need to make at least X plus $1, at least. It has to be bigger. Like that's what I thought growth was in a business. Meaning that if I did the same amount of sales or signed the same amount of clients and earned the same amount of money, I made it mean that my business is not going to be successful and there's no future in it. Okay, which now to me sounds absolutely ridiculous. But remember, I was coming from the world where we were measuring success of a project in quantitative terms. Did we meet the KPIs? Did we reach the target? And so on and so forth. Numbers were essentially determining whether I, myself, Vilma, as an individual contributor, or whether my team were a success or failure. Whether we were exceeding or at least meeting the targets, then we were a success. If we were doing below the whatever threshold, we were failing. So again, without much thought, what I did, I took the same sneaky shadow approach and I applied it to my new beautiful aligned career. And lo and behold, I quickly found myself not enjoying my business anymore, which was so alarming and confusing to me. That was at the very beginning. Here I was, working on my transition, having just transitioned into my dream-aligned work, into my business, but somehow feeling icky, like something was so off. And it took me some time and self-coaching and also getting coached by other coaches to realize that what happened is I got so indoctrinated and concentrated on the money goals, I forgot to connect to the why of my work, why I wanted to do this. Why did I even start? Why was I efforting so much to actually even start this business? Why was I studying so much to be able to do that? I forgot to think about the people that I had the honor to serve, people who trusted me with their most vulnerable parts and stories and dreams and fears. I forgot to check in and appreciate the fact that I could share content that people could read, and whether they were inspired or moved, it was none of my business. The fact that I had an opportunity to speak out loud, share my thoughts, and not get arrested or killed, that's an honor. That's a miracle, right? So I forgot that my actual success was not reaching a completely made up, arbitrary money target, but it was showing up authentically. That's what my success was. My success was waking up in the morning or Monday morning so excited that I get to come back and work on my business. My success was that I continued to learn with every client and I had an opportunity to serve them, to guide them on their path, to hold space for them. That was my actual success. And when I started focusing on that, the money, whatever amount that was, would flow. Always. It did and it still does. So if some of you who have maybe your business or starting a business, but you feel like the money is not what you had expected or wanted, this is an invitation to check in. Are you serving from your heart? Are you remembering actively as a practice why you chose this work? Not just, okay, I want to, help the world. I want to empower women. And then you say that a couple of times and then you completely forgot and you just literally dive into the business side of things and there's no soul there. If we do not regularly come back and check in with our mission, with our why, the well is going to dry out real quickly and we're going to be burning out just like we did in our corporate career. Right? So checking in, are you embodying the energy of your medicine? Or perhaps have you fallen into that graspy energy of need. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong if you have. All of us been there at different times, and we'll probably come back there over and over. Just make sure you connect with your ultimate why before you decide to perhaps close down your business or quit or pivot again and make it mean that it didn't work. Okay. Anyway, I'm not sure why I went there. Perhaps some of you needed this reminder, because what I actually wanted to chat to you about today is one of my favorite topics is the cycle of death and rebirth that we go through over and over and over again in our lives, consistently, repeatedly. It's something we can't avoid. And first and foremost, we experience this death and rebirth cycle on a cellular level. It's called apoptosis, or a programmed cell death. And it's sort of a very beautiful, elegant way of clearing out the old, the damaged, the unnecessary cells. And the body doesn't perceive it as destruction. It sees it as evolution, as transformation, as necessary evil. And this process is absolutely essential for development, immune function, tissue regeneration, and all of that. And also on top of that, as women, we go through death and rebirth cycle with our hormonal journey every single month as well. And because we live in this holographic universe, the way our body is built and the way that it renews physically is reflected how the universe is built and functions as a whole. As within, so without. The Bible says that too. Which tells us that this sort of cellular wisdom teaches us that letting go is such a necessary part for growth and renewal. We see that absolutely the same pattern in many also metaphysical traditions amongst so many cultures. As an example, it comes to my mind now, say in Buddhism, Hinduism, the cycle of samsara, which represents a continuous loop of birth, death, and rebirth, which again, it's the importance of transformation that is being emphasized, right? That there's constant movement and change. We just basically see the same principle anywhere. And the death and rebirth is woven into the very fabric of our DNA and the DNA of this time and space reality. And yet, if you look around, you'll notice that no one resists this cycle of death and rebirth more than us little humans. Nature doesn't resist it. Notice how much beautiful, calm acceptance the plants and the trees have when it comes to the changes in seasons. They will bloom in summer when the conditions are supportive of the bloom, and they will drop the leaves when it's time to preserve their energy and rest in colder months. No arguing, no tantrums, just sacred flow and completely giving into that. And I feel like, again, I said that so many times, we can learn so much from nature's flow because they're giving us the map. The nature is giving us the map, especially when we're going through our seasons. And the reason why I'm bringing this to this podcast is because career change, launching a business, doing something new, stepping into this new version of yourself is a new season. But we can't fully step into, say, the summer of our career business without first having gone through the fall and the winter. And that's something not many of us want to go through or admit that we need to go through. Because in order to birth something new, we will have to make space by saying goodbye to the old. We can like it, we can hate it, we can ignore it, but we're all going through it. Right? The old ways of thinking, the old ways of seeing ourselves, the old patterns of perhaps dimming our light or people pleasing, the old stories that we've been telling ourselves, we will be asked to willingly go through an ego death or several dark nights of the soul and death of the old outdated aspects who took us this far, and we can be so grateful for them, but they won't be able or simply can't take us any further. They can't take us to the new version that we are becoming. So we will be asked to say goodbye to them, to leave them behind before we can fully step into this upgraded energy upgraded frequency that can contain more of our truth, more of our authenticity, more of our light. And in that sense, career change will involve both the death and the rebirth. And I feel like there's a little bit of misunderstanding and misconception when we think about this type of change, because I feel like we tend to focus on the rebirth part and underemphasize or not necessarily spend enough time nursing the death part of this change. Right? Because we can't fully ground into the rebirth until we've finished going through and clearing of the death cycle. And obviously I'm talking about here figuratively. I'm not, romanticizing death like physical death. I feel like we're on the same page here. And another piece, I feel like, again, even when we talk about the letting go, the death part of the cycle, it's really not one and done. The letting go, the cleansing, the clearing, the transmuting and alchemizing of the old can take and will take months or sometimes years. But as per usual, the longer the more we resist this natural way of flow, the longer it will take us. And the more intentional we are about it, the more we embrace it, the less painful it becomes, and the smoother this transition into the next level can play itself out in this game we call life. And the reason why I've decided to record this podcast on this, and I don't think it's going to be a very long one, but I feel like I've been noticing some of you insisting on holding on to the old identities, holding on to the status, to the stories of the previous life, if you will, that you've had in the previous career or the career that you are exiting. And then you wonder why this new path perhaps does not unfold quick enough. I hear that a lot, especially those of you who still have to keep the day job and then you keep on getting stuck. But if we did a little bit of an audit and investigated what stories you're telling yourself, we'll find that, say, 70 to 80% of your identity is still very much rooted in your current career, even if you're saying that you hate it. And only 20% is your new career. So then the change is obviously going to be delayed, and the results are going to take much longer to show up because energetically you do not match the frequency of this new work, career, industry, business identity that you claim that you want, right? It can't come in because you haven't made enough space. And this is what the stuckness and liminality between the old you and the new you, this is how it can manifest itself. So I have a couple of examples I want to share with you. So maybe you can listen, hear me out, and then notice whether you resonate to like some of them or a variation, a flavor of what I'm sharing. So for example, say you left your executive position, you're working for a prestigious company, and say you start to own coaching practice. I'm using that as an example because I know that there are quite a few of you who want to move into healing careers. However, so that's done. You left, you're launching a business, but whenever you meet someone new now, you still introduce yourself with, hi, I'm Marie. I used to be the VP of marketing at blah, blah, blah. Instead of confidently saying something like, I'm a transformational coach. I help professionals align with a purpose. So you find yourself still leaning on and trying to lead with the old identity. You still check your old company's updates, or you maybe feel a little bit of a pang when you see that, you were replaced and your position was filled, or someone got promoted in your old company, right? Or another example, say you've decided to transition from accounting to making jewelry. Shout out to Stacy, who was on my podcast. She's a lawyer who turned into a jeweler. But say instead of building your practice and your business, you are enrolling into the 3rd jewelry course this year. And you tell yourself, well, I'll start once I have just a little bit more training, once I have a little more qualification, and you don't recognize that you're using education as a safety blanket. Because the part of you that values security and validation of the formal credentials, formal career in accounting is preventing you from stepping into the uncertainty of actually practicing your new craft, putting your jewelry out, pricing it, promoting it, selling it, packaging it, sending it to people. Right? Because in accounting, it was all about credentials and learning first. So you're applying the same method, whereas in creativity, it's the exact opposite. Or perhaps you used to make 6 figures in tech, and now your heart-centered business is only generating a fraction of that income. And even though you do notice that you're happier and more fulfilled, but you still find yourself hiding the truth about your finances from your friends or family, right? Or maybe you were just adding a 0 to what you are now. And what that shows us that you're still measuring your worth by your previous salary benchmark. And it's just not fair. Or you're making choices based on appearing successful rather than building authentic connection with those potential clients and actually signing them and reaching your income goal. Another one also that I see quite often, so check in perhaps if you do that too. So say you've decided to launch a new business, and what you're doing now is you've written your new website copy like 15 times, but you haven't published it because it doesn't feel quote unquote professional enough. Okay. Or you compare your beginning to other people's middle chapters, feeling that perhaps your offerings must match the same polished look of those established brands before you launch. So you're spinning, overthinking, changing your color scheme, changing your text without actually clicking publish. So what that shows us is that part of you that thrived on external validation in your previous career is now preventing you from embracing the beautiful messiness of growth and experimentation. Especially for those of you, now I'm going into human design world, especially for those for you who have a free in your HD type, the line free, they need to experiment a lot. They need to try, they learn by experimenting, not thinking. Right? So sometimes all of it can be so sneaky and barely noticeable, but please don't underestimate. It's powerful. And surrendering to the unknown is obviously not going to be so appealing for you. So without even noticing, we could get stuck between these two identities. So if you recognize yourself in some of these scenarios, you might be resisting to fully undergo the death part of the death and rebirth cycle. You might be resisting of letting go. Or perhaps, I've also seen that happen, perhaps you're on the exact opposite side of the spectrum where you have embraced the death part, so much so that you surrendered and got real cozy and comfortable in this void. And now you might be avoiding to dive back into the rebirth, the power, the phoenix cycle of the phase. That could happen too. I've seen people who get real comfortable in the dark. Okay. So what I want to do is give you perhaps a few more tangible prompts so you could get some clarity whether you too might be resisting to go through the whole, full, complete death and rebirth cycle as you're experiencing this beautiful unfolding and this beautiful change. Like I said, if you were to ask me, Vilma, but why should I do that? Doesn't it naturally happen? Yes, of course, naturally you can go through that. But if you intentionally embrace it, again, that will allow you to save a lot of time, avoid a lot of pain, avoid feeling stuck. It will literally just make the whole journey so much smoother, meaningful, and like it's happening at the right time. Okay. By the way, again, if I gave some specific examples, but some of the other signs that you might be resisting the death and rebirth cycle that I've seen, I also want to share with you. So again, check if you resonate with any of them. So perhaps you feel compelled to still mention your previous title, company, or industry or achievements, especially if you meet someone new. Perhaps you're still constantly seeking validation or permission from the mentors or peers that represent your old identity, but they really have no authority, understanding, or experience in your new field, but you still, for some reason, go back to them, knowing that they may not approve of or they may criticize what you're doing. That's a sneaky way to keep yourself small as well. Perhaps you're experiencing a little bit of prolonged quote unquote imposter syndrome because you're trying to meet the standards of both your old identity and your new identity simultaneously. As you know, I don't believe in imposter syndrome. I do believe in part work though. So you want to understand which part is still holding you back. A lot of the times, however, it's not the part work. It's really just you resisting to let go. Or for instance, maybe you still find yourself saying yes to opportunities that align with your old identity, even if you see that you drain their energy. It has happened, like I've seen clients, for instance, see they fully transitioned and then someone from the previous industry reaches out to them and says, hey, I know that you're not doing this anymore, but an opportunity opened up and it's really good money. Would you be willing to come back as a consultant or whatever that is? And those invitations are usually really sexy. They really make you think, right? And there are times when you probably want to take it, especially if you feel like financially that would make sense. But there are sometimes that financially you're okay, but your ego still is leaning to go back there to almost prove something to them or yourself. Perhaps that you still are able to do that, or you love the idea that you're still valued. And what happens then, you go back to misalignment, which will then cloud and bleed unhealthy, more toxic energy into this new endeavor that you're building. Okay. Another sign that you might be resisting the death and rebirth cycle could be that your pricing, your boundaries, your client selection still reflect your old values rather than your emerging ones. I see that a lot with like the practitioners that are starting out. So say they are enrolling clients and they will enroll absolutely everyone and anyone. So say, for instance, you sense that you want to work only with women. And because you're coming from a little bit of a scarcity mindset, you start saying yes to men as well. And again, there's nothing wrong with working with men. Like I love men. I said that many times. But what I'm talking about is alignment. If deep in your heart, if your authority is telling you that you should only support women and you start saying yes to men, why are you doing that? Could it be still the old values, the old way of perhaps doing sales that you were trained to do that, where you need to say yes to absolutely everyone that's coming through your door, which might not be the truth or your aligned and authentic self, right? Another common one is maybe you catch yourself thinking, like, once I reach that X milestone, then I will feel legitimate in this new role or this new business. And what will happen, and what I've seen happen, that goal keeps on changing. After the X, it will be the Y. After the Y, it will be the Z. Like, you can't reach that whole goal because it's not about the goal. It's about you postponing, embracing, and feeling like you already are legitimate just because you decided that you're legitimate. What is happening is you are not treating yourself as a legitimate business or a legitimate practitioner. So you are trying to outsource that work and that belief by enrolling into more certifications or getting more of those stamps of approval. But if you don't cultivate that feeling and again, that inner decision inside of you, no amount of certifications will help you. Or you will always be living in fear. I hear that a lot as well from clients, the fear that I will be found out. They will find out that I'm clueless, right? So living in fear is just not what we came here to do. So again, notice how many of them you resonate with. And if you do, I'd love for you to dig a little bit deeper because again, I said that many times. It's not really about collecting information. It's not really about consuming all of the podcasts and all of the audiobooks and all of the YouTubes. It's about pausing, implementing, introspecting, and then making a change. Okay. So if you would love to journal about this and get a little more clarity, whether you're someone who might be stuck in this death and rebirth cycle and either resisting the death or the rebirth part of the cycle, this is what I'd love for you to think about. Are you experiencing any physical symptoms of being the in-between? So some of the ones that I've noticed that are common, insomnia, digestive issues, constant anxiety. Our bodies will register the stress of holding contradictory identities, and there will be symptoms. There will be symptology telling us when we're stuck between these two identities and we're refusing to let one go. Another one, what language do you use when you think about yourself right now? Do you speak of your new path in the present tense? I am doing, I'm creating, I'm launching, I'm signing, or do you still frame it as something you'll fully embrace in the future? So that will sound like, I'm trying to quit, I'm hoping to build, I'm planning to build this business, trying, hoping, planning, working on it, but not actually doing any work. What language do you use? Language tells us, it literally gives away all of our belief systems so quickly. Again, what parts of your previous identity are you still carrying as a backup plan in case this new path doesn't work out? Another great one, I really, really love this exercise, which is I'd love for you to look at your calendar, like say past week, and double check, or maybe even past month, and double check how much time was dedicated to all of the activities that are aligned with your new path versus perhaps maintaining the old connections or the connections to your old path, especially if you already transitioned, okay? Also, just ask yourself, what would this complete surrender to your new path look like? And what precisely, specifically scares you about that vision? Because clearly there's something that parts of you deem as threatening. That's why they refuse to go all in. Is your nervous system experiencing a split and holding these two identities? And if your future self, who by the way now has fully made this transition, if she or they were sitting across from you, what would they lovingly tell you to let go of right now? We can go into a meditative state and then ask yourself these questions and journal out and see what comes through. I know that there's going to be so much gold in what you find there. Because as per usual, at this stage, if you already found an aligned path, have a direction, and it's all about just moving towards it, and you feel like you're getting stuck, you're not stuck because you don't know the how. You're not stuck because you don't know the strategy or you lack the tactical information, because that can literally be Googled, or you can use ChatGPT to help you out. The reason why you're stuck is there's something within your mindset and your belief system and thoughts that is stopping you from moving forward. And once we find that roadblock and we remove it, everything will start flowing, right? And this transition, again, a reminder, this whole episode is a reminder that the whole transition isn't just about gaining something new. It's about consciously learning to release what no longer serves you. It's being comfortable in that space between identities that is your threshold. That's a sacred threshold. And by acknowledging what you're still clinging to, you start creating the possibility for something more aligned to come in. And just as you see the nature doesn't resist its cycles, you too can learn to flow with these changes. And then you will realize, I'm still realizing with every new version and evolution of myself, is that inner winter of letting go is not a failure, but it's a very necessary season that makes my and your eventual blooming possible. So my sincere wish for all of us is to embrace and fall in love with this beautiful, gorgeous, inevitable cycle of death and rebirth. And the quicker we embrace it, the quicker we can be reborn as a more magnetic, alluring, elevated version of ourselves. And then we get to do it again and again and again. And each time we get to come back more spacious and more capable of holding our authentic truth and creating lives and careers by design. I love you all. Take good care of your precious hearts, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you enjoy this content, please make sure you subscribe to this podcast and leave a quick review to help us share the message of aligned work with the world. And if you'd like to learn more about how to find and transition into your very own purpose-led career or business that feels like getting paid for being yourself, make sure you check out the episode notes below. Have a wonderful week.